Fight!
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the third video in our series of making a Minecraft creeper. Excited to have you with me. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and in this video I think we're just going to focus the first 15-20 minutes or so on further detailing and getting our proportions kind of lined up more closely to our concept. We're always kind of iterating in that regard. And then the last half of the video we'll do strictly just 3D print prep and getting that ready. 3D print prep. Did I say prep? Prep. 3D print prepped. And get that all prepped for our resin printer. So this is the concept as a happy reminder where we wanted to go, and this is kind of where we left off. So our proportions are a little bit off, and the first thing I've noticed is that the head of our character is a little more scaled up in Y. This eye is probably a little bit bigger, and this is a little bit smaller. And so I kind of want to achieve these proportions. I think they're kind of a big deal. So what I'm going to start with is just, our topology is still pretty high, so it's going to be a little bit tricky to make these larger form adjustments. Usually you like to do that on the lower res, or kind of just lock that down before you start getting into all the little fine detailing. But it's still doable. It's easier if you have subdivision levels and you can like step all the way down to your low poly, but in this case we don't have that. So what I'm going to do is hold control and switch to my mask pen, and then with symmetry turned on I'm just going to start to kind of paint the head area down kind of to the neck. And if you want to feather the edge of your mask, you can do that by holding control and then dragging the RGB intensity down to like 22 or whatever, and then that mask will be less intense. So you can kind of paint feather that edge. You can also come over here to the masking drop down, and there's different options. You can grow your mask, you can shrink, you can sharpen, blur. Blurring can take a while on high poly meshes. So usually I'll just click that like 5 or 6 times or whatever. But I think for now this is good. And then I'll just switch over to my transform tool, and then recenter. So unlock, reset our orientation, and then center that. And because we have things inverted, we just need to control, left click tap outside of our geometry, and then go back to unmask center. And I want to pivot this from the neck area, so I'm going to use the white Oreos to move that into the neck area, and then I'm going to rotate the head back, and also you click this little square to scale, and then I'm going to scale in Y just by clicking that green square cube thing in the gizmo. Kind of come up a little bit too, and I mean you could just honestly reset this down to the pelvis area and then just scale all of it up just a little bit too. And then be sure to do your see-through and kind of line it up the best you can, and just kind of see, okay, I'm getting pretty close at this stage. I think it's probably going to work just fine. But I'm going to switch over to my snake hook tool as well and just scale up my draw size. Just hit S and just drag to the right. And I'm going to try and just get these guys lined up a little bit better with my concept, because I really liked what was going on, and this is going to be good for you too if you're actually doing client work and they want things to be more precise, just closer in general. This eye, obviously I'm out of symmetry at this point, so I'm going to turn off X. I'm not going to do any symmetrical modeling. I'm just going to turn that off and try and get these things to line up a little better. So I think that's looking good. Obviously some of the mushrooms aren't lining up, but I'm not super worried about that. We actually got surprisingly close with some of the profile. The legs need some work. So for these guys, I think again we'll continue to modify our one leg here. And I don't like these big giant toenails, so I think I'm actually gonna try a different solution for those. So I'm just gonna get rid of these guys by Control Shift Alt lassoing those and get those out of the way. And then come over to geometry and then delete hidden. And then just make sure that I Rerun, make sure Dynamesh is active because sometimes that gets broken with the different functions that you use. And I think for these toenails, I'm gonna add, well, first thing, I'm gonna squash these guys down. I don't like how big they are. So let's kind of squash them down like that. And then I maybe want to add like some to the side here too. So just using the clay buildup brush to pull these guys out. And then snake hook to kind of shape the bottom. And just smoothing stuff back, and more clay buildup to add that kind of skin fold that goes around the cuticle area. And then our trusty inflate brush to just inflate it all out. It just creases things nicely, and I think I like that a little bit better. I'll probably just add that one on that one side. And then re-Dynamesh, make sure everything's even. And then I'm just using the Damien Standard to carve in the grooves and the nails. Maybe do some of these up top too. And again, some of this detailing just probably won't come through, but it's worth a shot anyway. It's worth the practice. Just to get better fine detail work. And I'm going to use pinch right now to adjust some of the large proportions, just scaling up the draw size, and just maybe pinching in that contact point with the leg. Because I think my concept had the legs less inflated out, less kind of large. Go back to our noise brush and get some of the noise on the back side of the leg. I really like the noise brush. It does some kind of unpredictable things that can be interesting. Re-Dynamesh. So yeah, I like this little nail that's kind of jutting out the side here. And flatten out the bottom a little. And then we'll do our classic mirror and weld on X and Z to get us the forelegs. And you're starting to see why I haven't attached these legs to the body yet, because this kind of iteration would be kind of a major headache if everything was attached to the main body. We'll get there by the end of the video, where we just kind of merge everything down. In fact, we could probably do that right now. I think I'm fairly happy with these guys. I might just get rid of some of the symmetry. Like, for example, I don't want these same warts on both sides of these legs, so I'll just like use my clay buildup and kind of clean that up, push those back in. Maybe smooth those out, or H polish to kind of flatten those out. I don't want your general person to see that I cheated and used symmetrical modeling. So it's a shameful thing. So we'll do the same on maybe on this side right here. We're never going to see the other ones in the same frame, so just do this guy and call it good. And then run our re-Dynamesh and maybe go back over that with our noise. Oops, go back to noise. Awesome. I think things are looking a little better. We did some weird stuff with our shapes earlier because we were just modifying on that from that one perspective, and so it's always really good to tumble around as much as possible to give yourself a truly like 3D perspective on your character and your work. Always just remember, when's the last time I rotated? When's the last time I looked at it from a different angle? Because that can always be a gotcha working in 3D. I don't think we've run our inflate in this particular area, so that'll be helpful. I still want everything to look like cubes overall. Like my large forms, I want them to still kind of maintain the spirit of Minecraft and being, you know, cubes. I'm gonna hit save, do save next, version up. Always version up, just to, you know, secure your state. I'm gonna try to add some other kind of droopy bits right here. Just going to continue to emphasize these details. One magical thing in ZBrush that kind of came out semi-recently is this, in the deformation, you can come down here to contrast, and you can drag this slider all the way, you know, to the point where your detailing just gets bumped exponentially. This is really, really good. I usually try to do this right before I send off to print. Just to make sure that we're going to see the details at scale. You could also mask an area. You can hold control and just kind of paint like a certain area. Make sure your RGB is bumped back up to 100. And then you could invert that and then just run that contrast on that specific little area if you wanted to do that. Sometimes you get some weirdness where it starts to stretch the polygons too much. If there's not enough resolution in those, just be aware of that. Okay, just increasing the slime factor here. Okay, and then the I think we're pretty much good on the detailing of this guy. Fairly happy with that. Maybe the eye could be a tiny bit bigger. This one eye, that is. And we'll be sure when we paint that to just paint black on the inside so those really stand out nicely. And then we'll hit save. And another nice thing in my concept, if I Alt-Tab over, we see I've got like some kind of grass or vegetation that he's standing on the base. I like to usually add some kind of detail to the base so they're not just kind of just boring like this. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit Control D to subdivide to kind of get the polygons, the faceting and the polygons out of the way. And then I'll just delete lower. And I'm actually going to just duplicate this guy for now. Just to kind of secure, you know, the old one in its state, and then I'm gonna just start masking holding control and using my mask pen tool to start to paint where I want the grasses to be to kind of collect. Maybe I kind of want it to wrap around the side too. And another fun trick is, let's say I don't want to have to go through and paint all this inner stuff right here for my mask. You can come over here to masking and then click on auto region, and it'll magically just fill in that region for you. So it's one of the nice semi-recent additions too that is amazing. It's really, really helpful, especially if you're drawing out, masking a ton of different details. Very, very helpful. Okay, so remember too, you can control tap and blur, or control alt tap and sharpen that mask. Just want those guys to wrap around a little bit. And then we're going to use this fun, fancy thing called fiber mesh. If you click on fiber mesh over here in your tool, drop down and go to Lightbox Fibers, it's going to give you all of these options of different fiber types that you can start with. And I think for now, we could probably, you can just click and scroll over. We could probably start with, we might have to, we're gonna have, this is gonna be iterative. We're gonna have to just find the right one. But I think I'm just gonna start with this Fibers 196 right here. Just double click on that guy, and it's gonna load up those fibers based on the mask. All right, so it's placed a bunch of grass within your mask. And obviously, this looks radical, but it's way too long. So we'll come in here to our modifiers right here. And then we'll change our length way down, way down. Probably do like 60 or 70 or something like that. And then, I mean, that's kind of cool, but also I think I want less gravity. I want the grass to kind of stand up a little bit more. And then max fiber count, I'm going to drop down just a little bit. I don't need to get that crazy with it. And you can actually change your texture too if you like. You can come over here and just say texture off just to get rid of that. Because we're not going to need texturing for our purposes. And then there's just a bunch of values here. You can adjust your twist value, you know, your scale. This will actually scale the width of the geometry. Your coverage will do the same. So we do actually want it to be quite thick, this is really helpful. And then our length is probably a little bit too much still. We'll go down to 50. So be sure to crank your coverage so we can use less of these fibers to cover more, and also we need to get this thing printed, and I'm going to show you how to make that work. So let's do a little bit more on the coverage. And then maybe down on the gravity just a little bit. And from there, we just have to come to preview settings. I think it's preview. Yep, preview settings. And now we just need to hit accept. And this is going to, if you just hit no, it's going to convert that to like an actual geo that we're familiar with, that we can work with. So just be sure you do that. And obviously we need to add thickness to each one of these, because if I was to push in on one of them, you'll see it's just a single-sided polygon, and that's not going to print. So one way to do that is you can come over here to your brushes and come to this awesome Z modeler brush and just hit OK. This is a really cool brush because this allows us to have a more of a, if you're familiar with traditional 3D modeling, which sounds like a weird thing to say, it's a polygonal modeling workflow. So you're extruding faces and you're welding vertices and you're extruding edges and things like that, inserting loops, and you can do that with the Z modeler brush. And you'll notice as you mouse over, you can mouse over the different, like on this guy for example, I can mouse over an edge, I can mouse over the face, or I can mouse over the vert. And when I do that, a different process is enabled for each one of those. And let's say, so it says Q-Mesh a polygon right now. Q-Mesh is a ZBrush proprietary thing for extrude the polygon. And we do want to do that, but I don't want to use Q-Mesh, so I'm going to change the function by holding spacebar. And it brings up this list of everything you can do. This is the actual function you can do on that polygon. And this is the target. So I can do all the polygons that are on this subtool. It'll affect all of those, which is what I want. You can also do it based on polygroup, which is another one I do as well. But in this case, I don't want a Q-Mesh because that's going to break things. I'm just going to do an extrude. So extrude, and then you'll notice it switched back to single poly because I changed the function. But we'll do all polygons extrude. And now if I mouse over the face, so the center of the polygon, and I click and drag, I'm going to save because this can be kind of an intensive process, especially with all of these polygons. So mouse over the face and then click and drag to the right. And now we are adding actual thickness to our geo that is going to print. And it's obviously very polygonal looking right now because it's low poly. So you can just hit Control D and subdivide, and it'll add some roundness to those edges. And I don't recommend subdividing too many times because you're going to break things. But let's say I want to inflate these out just a tiny bit too. You can come over here and run your inflate function. And it's starting to look kind of like a carpeted grass or moss kind of feel. And that's cool, I guess. So it might be a little bit too much, a little bit too crazy. We can always come in here and just like snake hook and like kind of move things around. I need to turn my RGB off. And kind of, you can push that out of the way of the feet, you know, so the feet are showing up a little bit more. And we can just modify these fibers now as a normal geo. So let's just try and push them out of the way of the feet so we can reveal our cool work that we did there, where he's kind of like tramping that down a little bit. So, and I know like this, obviously they look kind of weird right now. They look kind of like worms or something, but it's gonna look fine when you print it at scale. It's gonna, I mean, and you get it painted and everything, it's gonna read as grass or as a moss. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I'm not gonna analyze this too much, but you can see how powerful fiber mesh can be in just giving you like, you know, a little carpet, a grass carpet area, or adding like moss to rocks and things like that. It works really, really well. In fact, you could go around and mask this guy and add like an interesting little moss pass throughout him if you wanted to. Just all you do is you come up here and you would just, you know, control and then paint your masks, and then come over here to fiber mesh and just do the same thing. Just load up whatever type of fiber you wanted and it would load right onto that guy. So I'm not going to get that crazy. I kind of want to wrap up this series, or at least this video, so we're just going to continue to kind of clean this stuff up a little bit. And I've noticed that this stuff does print fine. It can get a little crazy with supports depending on how things are oriented, and it has to, you know, run supports on these, but for the most part I think it handles it pretty well. Cool, so we got this interesting kind of grass on this guy, and let's just go ahead and merge our base down to our grass. So you'll remember we still have our mask that we painted, so go ahead and control left click and drag and clear your mask, and then merge that base down to the grass below, and we can run a Dynamesh on here to kind of shrink wrap it all together. So I'll bump it to 2 or 3 something, hit Dynamesh, and wait for that to cook, and maybe crash the ZBrush. We'll see. This number's tricky to kind of navigate because sometimes we don't know what that number means. I don't know what 320, if that means faces or millions, or nobody knows. It's a mystery. So you got to iterate with that and make sure you save often when you're doing this kind of stuff. But it seemed to work okay. It took 10-15 seconds. And now everything is kind of shrink wrapped together. I like to use that term because I feel like that best explains kind of what it's doing. It's just connecting verts together that are neighboring and just making things just generally more printable. And obviously I think my grass probably is just a little bit too long. I probably would have done a more subtle kind of grass in hindsight. Maybe do an inflate could kind of help some of this out a little bit. You could also add, yeah, like you could go through and add little rocks. You could make a little rock brush if you'd like, and just grab a sphere and then use noise and just make a rock and then convert that into an insert mesh brush, and you can just drag some little rocks in there. But for now, I think this is looking okay. We'll just leave that guy. Just trying to get the extremes in just a tiny bit. And one thing that I don't know that I ever covered, which is surprising, is I didn't cover like the perspective versus the orthographic view. So if I hit P on my keyboard, it switches me to an orthographic view, or what that means is it's flattening it out. So there's no perspective on the model. So you notice like I can't see the other legs on the other side of this, behind this. But if I hit P, I'll start to see that perspective in those other legs. And so P, you know, perspective is the way that we see. But this is in orthographic view, this is how the 3D software can see. And so when you're doing your modeling and you want things to be symmetrical, it's smart to work in an orthographic view. But then when you're kind of looking at it, making sure it's looking all right, it's good to hit P and just kind of switch back. So you can also do that over here by just clicking on this button. And you can also adjust your focal length by coming over here to draw, and then down here to the camera area, you can click on like 24, for example, and then that'll give you more perspective. So now if I hit P, you'll see a huge difference in that. So I like to work in perspective mode as often as I can because that's the way we see. So I prefer that, but it's also can be problematic if you're doing symmetrical stuff. All right, so I think this guy is pretty much good for now. I think what I'm actually gonna do is I might undo, go back before I ran a Dynamesh on this guy. I know it's a long ways to go back. But some of these I'm just not digging how much they stick out, you know. So I'm going to get all of these guys in their own poly group. Right now you can see like each poly loop is in its own poly group. And so I'm just gonna hit OK. I hit Control Shift. Ooh, this is gonna be tricky, guys. So it looks like that poly group is in the grass too. You could do a scary thing. What I'll do is I'll hit save first and then come over here to poly groups and run an auto group, and we'll see how long this takes, and it might break the entire world in our very existence, but we'll see what happens. I might have to skip ahead. Okay, so I did have to pause because that was taking forever, but you can see what it did. It just added everything into its own group based on topology, and I just wanted to get access to our little base underneath here. And I just wanted to have the control of maybe culling some of these guys out if I wanted to, so it's kind of getting scope creepy, but I didn't like how it's like spilling over the sides as much. So I'm just going to try and scoot that stuff back in. First things first, I'll come in here and I'll just mask my base because I don't want to modify that guy at all. I want to keep its form. And then just kind of pull these guys in a little. Deform and do another inflate, and I think that's looking a little bit better. You could use a nice, a really cool brush called Move Topological too. So you come over here to Move Topological, and it's only going to move that geometry that's within that topology. So you can grab individual little strands, blades of grass, and kind of pop those guys in. I just didn't like how these guys are kind of sticking out subtly out of the base. Okay, see how things are looking. And awesome. And if ultimately if you don't like these fibers, you could always just try another, different kinds of fibers. There's probably some better options there. And then be sure to just rerun your Dynamesh Minerity's geometry, and then just rerun your Dynamesh and just make sure that everything's kind of Dynameshed together. I think this allows it to print a little bit better when you run this. Thinking about it. Okay, I apologize for the back and forth, but I'm going to undo that because I have to do something to the base first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this guy. I'm going to get rid of, actually, I already had that duplicated, which is awesome. But I need to have 2 of these bases. I need to have access to 1, 2, like so, okay. And looks like this was the other one. So I'm going to Control Shift left click on the base, and I want to get rid of all the fibers on that. So modify topology, delete hidden. And just make sure that Dynamesh is activated. And hit Dynamesh, 128, a little bit higher, 240. So I have this base, and Dynamesh is active. That's the most important part. And then this base is going to be a subtractive mesh that we're going to kind of hollow out or shell this base. So we don't want to waste a bunch of resin is the point here. So I'm going to come over here to, I'm going to turn this little button from over here to over here, and this is going to make this a subtractive mesh. And then the other thing I have to do is come to polygroups and say group as Dynamesh sub, and it's going to change the color to a white color if your wireframe is on. And then I just want to make this other guy visible, turn off solo mode, and I want to scale this guy from the center. Just make sure your pivot is centered, and scale this guy down. And you can turn on transparency by clicking on this button right here. You see what's going on inside. And so I'm going to make a mesh that I can subtract from the base so that we don't have to print so much resin, because resin isn't free. And so I want to try to keep it, give it some thickness, but not so much that it's going to break the bank. And okay, so with those things, with this subtractive mesh being on the bottom of the mesh that you're subtracting from, clicking this button and then changing it to a polygroup, group as Dynamesh sub, we are good now to merge our top one. This is the one we're keeping down to our subtraction mesh. Merge down, and then you have to run a Dynamesh by control left clicking and dragging, and then it's going to do a subtraction. So now if I look at the inside of that, I have it nice and subtracted and hollowed out, so it's not gonna hurt when I print. And so from there we are good now to merge our fibers down to our base, and then run our Dynamesh at 272 and just hit Dynamesh. Okay, and so now everything you can see is kind of combined together, and you can come over here and clean up some of these little bumps too, just smooth those guys out. Well, those aren't going to show up too much if you do your best to smooth those. And there's our base. So if we turn everything on, holding shift and then left clicking on the eye, we'll turn everything on except for our insert mesh brushes, and we can see how everything's looking together. And let's say for kicks, you want to see this thing with shadow just for fun. You can just come over here and click on this BPR render button, and it's going to add some shadows to it. It's going to do like a little preliminary render. And I like to do this because it's nice to see how your details are going to show up with shadowing. So you can just rotate around, hit BPR, check it out. I think it's looking pretty cool. I really like the shadows that are cast by these little half mushroom bits. This guy's cool. I think I'm pretty happy with him. And so now from here, we just want to make sure we combine everything together. So I have my base, my legs, my torso. We can actually just delete these guys for now. These are our insert mesh brushes. And then we'll hit save, and we'll do a save next. I like to version up frequently when I'm doing the print prep process because we're going to get into some semi-destructive stuff here. And I'm going to start by merging my base down to the legs, and then merge the legs down to our torso. So now everything is combined. If I hit solo, we're all merged into one subtool. And I just want to run a Dynamesh on all of this character, and I'm actually going to version up first. And sometimes I like to rename things, so I'll be like, this is version 7, but also I'm at prepped. So this is informing me that in the naming convention that this is now prepped for print as opposed to being a workable split up subtool. So I'm just going to hit save and rerun our Dynamesh, probably crank it to 3 something and just hit Dynamesh, and this will probably take just a second to do. And turn off our polyframe and take a look and make sure that our details are all still there. But you'll notice that now my grass is combined in with my feet and everything's kind of combined together. The legs are now combined into the body. And cool. So we'll go ahead and hit save here, and then I'm going to version up again, hit save next, and this version I'm going to actually call this DEC for Decimated, which is a sweet band name. It's like a song you listen to on like a Tool album or something. So by decimation, what I mean is our poly count right now is pretty high. And how do I know what that is? I can mouse over my tool over here, and up the top it says base 1, and then below that it says about 4. It's just over 4 million polygons, and that's not crazy high. Your 3D print software like Chitubox could probably handle this, But to be safe, I like to just run a decimation. So I'll come over here to Z plugin, decimation master, and make sure that it's set at whatever percent of decimation. So it's going to be 20% of what it currently is. And I'll just hit pre-process current, and that's going to cook for just a minute. Usually the pre-processing takes a little bit, so I might skip ahead. It'd probably be like 2 or 3 minutes. You know what, I'm actually going to cancel that. Just hit escape on the keyboard for now. And first I'm going to run some detailing using my noise brush around the base. Because I just noticed that our whole character has roughness and detail to it, but our base is so smooth. So I think I'm just going to try to fake like this is dirt, that this stuff is all sitting on. So I'm just going to run this along this surface here real quick. You want to do this before decimation because decimation is going to reduce down your poly count in a way that it gives you a bunch of triangles and stuff that's not very workable for sculpting. So after you've decimated, I recommend that you kind of you're straying from making any little fine adjustments like this. So just do that real quick, smoothing back just a little bit. Maybe using the Damien standard, add like just a couple little like carved kind of grooves. Smooth them back. I'm not sure if that's really doing a whole lot, but sometimes it's fun to just run over everything with H polish too. It'll give it kind of like a carved feel. But I'm going to jump back over to my noise and really crank that. Alright, cool. Now let's go ahead and save and run our pre-process current. Okay, so that pre-processing took 2 minutes and 27 seconds. Now, in order to actually decimate, we have to click decimate current. So it's just always a two-step process, pre-process, and then decimate current. And decimating actually takes basically no time at all. And if I hit Shift F, you can see what it's done to my polyframe. It's added a bunch of little triangles, but it's done its best to maintain our detailing. And you're still good to make some large form adjustments at this state, but I recommend staying away from it, just being done with things at this stage. You could actually come in here to deform and run a contrast again and kind of try to push things a little bit, but it'll start to do some kind of weird things like it did with the base down here. And it looks like actually we did something bad. We lost our work that we had done. Huh, that's interesting. So this is the reason you version up, because you could go back and go back to where you would shell that out and kind of start fresh and just rerun your decimations. But for now, I'm just going to leave this, because we can always shell this and hollow it in Chitubox, which is what I'm going to show you right now. But first things first, let's get this thing scaled to real world scale. In order to do that, I like to just have a model that I've already downloaded. Like, you can find models online that are scaled to real world scale. You can get like centimeters or inches or whatever you prefer. I am in the US, so I'm going to use my own scale cube, which is like a 6-inch scale cube. And I will provide a link in the description below that you can download this yourself. Each one of these polygons represents 1 inch. And I want this guy to be, looks like I actually imported that on the wrong subtool. So I'm going to actually come down here to, I appended this cube, and now I'm going to import in my scale cube into that, my 6-inch scale cube. Okay. So now I have my scale cube here, and you can see if I look at my actual character, he's tiny. He's just this little tiny thing. And that's Zbrush's preferred working scale. It likes to be in small scale. So I'm just going to use my transform gizmo and scale that to whatever I want within that scale cube. Turning on transparency, let's say I want it to be like, probably only want it to be like just over 3 inches for now. So again, each one of these polygons represents an inch. Turn this guy on, and it looks like it's about 3.5 inches or so is fine. So I think we're good with our scale. I can now delete my cube out of there, or you could leave it in. It's not a big deal. We'll just leave it in for now. Actually, just get it out of the way though, and just hit save. And now we need to export our geometry into our 3D software. And so the first thing you want to know is that it adheres to polygroups when you export. So just make sure everything is one solid polygroup. So hit Control W, and you'll see that it changed the color. I hit it a few times just to be safe, so there's not one little straight polygon in there. And then I'll hit Export, and then I'll make a new, let's do this, creeper, and then I'll do like 2_print, and I'll do creeper 3.5 inch. Let's do that, and hit export, and it should only take a second to do that, and then we are good to dive into Chitubox. And Chitubox you can find for free. I'm just using the free basic version. You come over here to this folder on the left hand side and navigate to your creeper file, print folder, grab your 3.5 inch creeper, and I'm using the Saturn II, so this is my build window and settings for the Saturn II, and it's going to bring in your model. It'll be laying down like this, and I can just click on rotate and then click on the red circle and rotate the character. And I like to rotate things at roughly like a 45-degree angle. I feel like I get a better result avoiding build lines and things like that if I keep things at an angle. So you have your different transforms over here. You can move, you can scale, rotate. I recommend just having your scale locked in already before this state so you don't overwrite things or do anything weird. But I think that's a good angle for now. We don't want to print this thing solid, right? Because resin breaks the bank, and we don't want to spend a ton in resin. So one cool way you can do that is you can come up here to hollow, and it's going to make your wall thickness 1 millimeter thick, which is I think plenty. And right now there's no infill structure, so I want to add like a grid 3D infill structure for now. And I think I am good with this, so we'll just hit start. And then it'll run through and hollow your model in a matter of seconds. I used to do this on the Zbrush side, and then someone told me to stop doing that, and I kicked against it for a while, but then I said, oh, this is magical. It's so much quicker to do in Chitubox than it is in Zbrush, at least in my experience, the way that I was doing it. So we'll wait for this to cook for a second, and then it will actually display what it looks like here in that bar. Finishes. So now it'll slide down and you can see what it's doing. And this is the infill structure I was talking about before. It adds this kind of interesting kind of hex pattern. And now it is perfectly hollow. So that's cool. And now we know that everything is good there. You can also add you can dig a hole. So if you want resin to not get captured inside the shell, you can actually just click on this guy, click add hole, and find like an obscure location on the bottom or something like that where you can have the resin and it kind of drips out as it prints. The issue I've had with that is that it's almost impossible to get all the resin out sometimes, so just be careful with that. You might have to just let it sit in your IPA for a good long time. You can change the circle, you can change the size, the depth. Let's give it a go, I guess. We'll just crank this to like 11 or 12 millimeters, add hole, and then just click on the bottom there and see what it does. So now it's added that hole. You can see the infill structure there, and it's actually included that subtractive shape for you in case you wanted to use that to fill back in, which is really cool. But I think we'll just leave it for now, and we'll keep our little whole piece for now. That's fine. and make sure that everything is selected. So select all, and now we need to add our supports. So we'll come over here and click this little tab. This is our support tab. And you can import support settings for all the different resin types that you have. Right now I'm going to be printing with the TH72 from Resin, which is like a tough resin. So I already have everything preset to that. Just make sure that you, most of the resin manufacturers will come with a spec sheet that you can download or view, and then set all these settings accordingly. You can actually come over here to settings and change it to whatever you want. And so I actually need to change it back to my TH72. And these are mostly the settings that will get adjusted. You can import those settings if you don't want to have to do it manually. It's really easy to figure all this stuff out. So just if you're printing with TH72 from Resin, I would just recommend just typing that in, searching for that. It'll give you all the optimal settings for Chitubox, and then you're off to the races. So back to supports. It's going to take a second to load. I usually just use medium supports. I find that that's great. And you could steal my settings if you would like. Just hit pause and just type these settings in, and then I'll just click all, and it's going to start to generate those supports for us. Okay, so this is what it's come up with. You can see it's gotten it all figured out, and I mean this can be an iterative process. Maybe you don't want supports that are sticking into the eyes, so you might have to just reorient your model and then come back in and regenerate those supports. But for now, I think this is going to be fine. Our character kind of lends itself to working nicely with, like, these contact supports aren't going to show up because he's already got like a very noisy kind of surface area. So yeah, I think this is going to work for me just fine. I'll come back here to this tab over here. I'm going to save my file by clicking on this little Save Project button first. And just put that in my print folder. I'm going to version that 001. And so this is saving the working print file, okay? And now we need to save our actual file to our flash drive. So I'm going to run and grab our flash drive real quick. Okay, so I've got my flash drive plugged in, and now we need to save the actual print file. So there's two files, just remember with Chitubox. There's your working file, which is the file that I'm navigating in, or I'm working in right now. And then there's the output file. This file is the file that goes to your flash drive and into your printer, that the printer actually reads and prints. And so to get that file, we need to just click on this big slice button. And it's going to go through and slice the model into all the little teeny tiny layers that the print can use to, with its projector. And I'm using an MSLA. That's why I refer to like the layers being projected, because it's literally just taking each individual layer, projecting it into the resin, and curing each layer within the resin, as opposed to a little laser going around, infinitely until it's done. So. Awesome, so you can see your layers. You can drag this little slider down. It'll show you each layer that's going to print. And that's awesome. It'll also give you an estimate of kind of the time it's going to take. 12 hours, 12 whopping hours, which is a lot. In fact, I might come back and go back. And I think I'm just going to, because I'm too impatient, I'm going to rotate this guy down like this. And this is going to help with my print time. Yeah. And in fact, I think I'm actually going to print with a different resin too. I'm going to use my Soriatech Metal Gray Tough Resin. So you'll notice it adjusted the settings accordingly for that. So some of these values changed. But that's the one I want to use. And then I'm going to rerun all my supports. Okay, awesome. And from here, now I'm going to do I'm going to save first. And then slice. And then we just have to hit save, and we'll save to our actual flash drive that we've plugged in. Make a new Creeper folder and Creeper 3.5 inch, and just hit save. And also, if you look over here too, our time went down significantly. And that's also because I changed my resin type as well. I just didn't have such rigid, lengthy requirements in the time. And also by rotating it down, I didn't have to have so many layers. So it dropped it from 11 hours to 3 hours and 58. So 4 hours roughly, which is way quicker. So I'll actually be able to see this by the end of the day today. Okay, awesome. Write successfully to open the folder, so you can just click on that guy. It'll show you the actual file. And yep, so everything's good to go. And now we are off to the printer. So I'm going to hit back and just be sure to save again to be safe. And remember, we're saving our working Chitubox file and not our CTB print file. So those are two different files. It's always easy to, it's an easy gotcha. Cool. So that's it for this video. So we got our final adjustments made. We got things scaled to real world scale. We got things prepped for the printer. And in the next video, in the fourth video, we'll cover the physical print process. So we'll head over into my humble little studio where we'll pull the print out of the printer, and we'll clean it up, snap off the supports, and go into painting. So I'm excited for the next video, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you are happy with things. And again, yeah, get involved in the comments. Let me know what I can do better. Love you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.